The salvage vessel Velos drifted cautiously through the vast, empty void of space, its sensors sweeping over the derelict warship ahead. The massive structure loomed in the darkness like a dead behemoth, its battle-worn hull telling a tale of unimaginable violence. Captain Ralveth narrowed his 4 eyes as the readings scrolled across the hollow display. His scaled fingers tightened around the command chair. "That's a human ship," he muttered. The bridge fell into silence. Even the low hum of the ship's engines seemed to quiet at his words. The crew of the Velos, a diverse collection of species from across the Tsur Confederation, exchanged uneasy glances. "Are you certain?" Zyrek, the massive reptilian enforcer, growled. His thick tail flicked against the metal floor, a telltale sign of anxiety. "You've all heard the stories. Deathworlders don't just disappear. They linger waiting." Kelver, the ship's lead scientist, leaned closer to the hollow display, his mandibles clicking in fascination. Unlike the rest of the crew, the Yvani scientist was more intrigued than frightened. "Fascinating," Kelver murmured. "Look at the power readings. This ship is 2 centuries old, yet it still has energy reserves. That shouldn't be possible." "That's exactly why we should leave," Zyrek snapped. "This could be a trap. Humans were monsters in war. They built ships that wouldn't die, strategies that defied logic. You think they'd just let one of their warships drift alone in the void?" Ralveth considered the argument. Humanity had once been a rising force in the galactic community, feared for their aggressive adaptability, their reckless ingenuity, and their sheer endurance. Then, without warning, they vanished. No one knew why. No one had dared to ask. "Captain," Kelver pressed, "if this ship holds data logs, we could be sitting on the most important discovery in modern history. We might finally learn what happened to them." Ralveth exhaled sharply. His instincts screamed at him to turn back, to leave this ghost of a warship to drift in peace. But logic was undeniable. The credits, the political influence, the power of knowing what happened to humanity. "Prepare a boarding team," he ordered. "We go in." The air inside the warship was stale, tinged with the scent of corrosion. Their suit lights cast eerie shadows along the narrow corridors, revealing signs of battle, blast craters, melted plating, deep gashes where something had torn through the metal. Kelver ran a clawed hand over blackened scorch marks along the bulkhead. "Plasma burns," he noted, his voice laced with scientific curiosity. "But look, there's something wrong with them." Ralveth turned, frowning. "Explain." "The pattern is irregular. It's not just weapons fire. Something corrosive was eating through the metal." Zyrek growled low in his throat. "I really don't like this." Then they found the chamber. It was a cryostasis bay, lined with shattered pods, all except one. The last pod remained intact, its glass surface frosted over from centuries of preservation. Inside, a man floated, his uniform pristine, emblazoned with the insignia of the Terran Union Naval Forces. A nameplate read, "Commander Elias Vostatus. Suspended cryostasis last active." 200 years ago, Kelver's mandibles twitched in excitement. "A human," he whispered. "An actual human." Before anyone could react, the ship came to life. A distorted, mechanical voice crackled over the intercom. "Intruders detected. Engaging defensive protocols." The walls erupted with automated turrets. Red targeting beams snapped onto the crew. Zyrek roared, diving for cover. "I knew it!" Kelver scrambled backward as gunfire erupted, the ship's ancient defenses still very operational. Ralveth barely managed to dodge a blast before barking into his communicator. "Velos, we have a situation." A loud hiss cut through the chaos. The cryostasis pod's emergency release activated. The glass cracked, then shattered, releasing a cloud of freezing mist. The human convulsed violently, his body fighting against centuries of suspended animation. Then he gasped, a deep, ragged breath like a drowning man breaking the surface. His eyes snapped open. The aliens barely had time to react before Elias Voss moved. The human surged forward with an instinctual swiftness that defied explanation. In a single motion, He ripped a sidearm from a nearby locker, spinning to assess the threats around him. His eyes, sharp and filled with something raw, locked onto the nearest alien, Ralveth. "Stand down," Ralveth shouted, raising all four hands. "We are not your enemies." Voss's grip on his weapon didn't waver. His gaze darted to the automated turrets, the flashing red lights, the unfamiliar species standing before him. His mind was processing at inhuman speeds. "This isn't your war anymore," Kelver tried, his voice urgent. "Commander, listen to me, humanity is gone. You've been asleep for 200 years. Something in Voss's expression flickered, like a memory threatening to resurface. Then his jaw clenched. "The hell it isn't." He turned toward the bridge, his movements fueled by pure survival instinct. "Where are my people?" he demanded. Silence. Ralveth hesitated. "Commander, humanity has been missing for nearly 2 centuries. No one knows what happened to them." Voss's hands tightened into fists. His mind raced, fragmented images of battle flashing behind his eyes. "It wasn't just a war," he murmured. "We weren't fighting another species." A chill ran through Ralveth's body. "Then what were you fighting?" Before Voss could answer, the ship sensors flickered back online. The display screen, long dormant, suddenly came to life. A new alert pulsed in bright crimson. Anomaly detected. Something was out there. Something that had been waiting in the dark for centuries. Voss's face hardened. He gripped his weapon tighter and turned toward the bridge. "We need to move. Now." Kelver hesitated. "Wait, what are you saying?" Voss turned to the alien crew, his voice grim. "I'm saying whatever took humanity out just woke up." The air inside the derelict warship was thick with the scent of metal and decay. Every step echoed eerily, the only sound beyond the quiet hum of the team's life support systems. Dim emergency lights flickered, casting jagged shadows along the corridors. Zyrek's claws tapped nervously against the floor. "I hate this," he muttered. His reptilian tail flicked, betraying his unease. "I hate this so much." Kelver, on the other hand, was practically vibrating with excitement. His mandibles clicked as he ran a scanner over the walls. "Fascinating. The power readings are stable, but the energy signature isn't entirely conventional." He peered at the data scrolling across his wrist display. "This isn't just a derelict with residual power. Something is actively maintaining it." Ralveth's 4 eyes scanned the corridor ahead. He gripped his plasma sidearm tighter. "Stay close. No unnecessary risks. We get the data and we get out." The deeper they moved, the more unsettling the wreckage became. The battle scars on the ship's interior weren't normal. They weren't from plasma fire or missile impacts. These markings. Kelver traced a long, jagged groove running across the bulkhead. The metal wasn't just torn, it was rent, like something had slashed through it with immense force. "This wasn't made by standard weapons." Zyrek grunted. "No kidding. This looks like something tried to rip the ship apart from the inside." Then they found the chamber. It was a cryostasis bay. Most of the pods were shattered, long since ruined by time or battle. But at the far end of the room, one remained intact. The glass was covered in frost, but inside, suspended in time, was a man. Kelver practically shoved Zyrek aside to get closer. He wiped at the frost with trembling fingers, revealing a nameplate beneath. "Commander Elias Voss status. Suspended cryostasis last active 200 years ago, a human." Kelver's voice was barely a whisper. "An actual human." Zyrek took a wary step back. "Yeah? Well, let's not wake him up. Ever." Before anyone could react, the ship came to life. A garbled, distorted voice crackled through unseen speakers. "Intruders detected. Engaging defensive protocols." The chamber erupted in red light. Warning sirens blared. The ship wasn't dead. It had been waiting. Kelver yelped as automated turrets unfolded from the ceiling, targeting them. "Move!" Ralveth shouted. Plasma fire rained down, forcing the team to dive for cover. At that moment, the cryostasis pod's emergency release activated. Gas hissed. The glass retracted. And Commander Elias Voss took his first breath in 2 centuries. His body convulsed as he gasped for air. Then his eyes snapped open. Ralveth barely had time to raise his weapon before the human moved. In a single, fluid motion, Voss ripped free from the restraints, his body coiled with tension. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the chaos, the aliens, the gunfire, and his instincts took over. Voss lunged. Zyrek roared as the human grabbed his weapon and twisted it from his grip. Before the reptilian could react, Voss had him pinned against the bulkhead, the confiscated firearm aimed squarely at Ralveth. "Identify yourselves," Voss demanded, his voice hoarse but firm. Kelver held up his hands, slowly, carefully. "We're not your enemy," he said, his voice even. "We're explorers. We found your ship abandoned." Voss didn't lower the weapon. "Where's the rest of my crew?" No one answered. The ship shuddered violently. Kelver's wrist display flickered with new warnings. "Something's happening," he muttered. "Wait, the power spike. It's coming from..." Before he could finish, a deep, mechanical groan echoed through the ship. The security monitors flickered, showing a long-forgotten part of the vessel. A containment chamber. The doors were failing. Voss's grip on the weapon tightened. "No," he breathed. "That's not possible." Ralveth turned to him. "What isn't possible?" The containment locks flashed red, one by one, before disengaging entirely. The doors hissed open. For a long moment, there was only darkness. Then something moved. A glistening, shifting mass slithered forward, almost formless yet undeniably alive. It pulsed as it absorbed the dim light, twisting into strange, jagged shapes. Then, in an instant, it shifted. The once amorphous entity stretched, taking on an approximation of humanoid form, but distorted, unnatural. Its surface rippled, like liquid metal fused with sinew. Kelver stumbled back. What is that thing?" Voss had seen this nightmare before. "A war humanity never finished," he muttered. Then, more forcefully, "We need to move. Now." The creature lunged. Zyrek roared and fired. The plasma bolt struck its target, but instead of injury, the energy was absorbed. A second later, the creature retaliated, its arms splitting apart into jagged tendrils that lashed out. One struck Zyrek, sending the massive reptilian crashing into the wall. Kelver scrambled for cover. "It adapts," he realized in horror. "It learns." Voss was already moving. He grabbed Ralveth and shoved him toward the exit. "Run!" The corridor became a war zone. The creature slashed through metal like paper, twisting and morphing as it advanced. Every shot fired was absorbed, every attack countered. Then Voss saw the control panel. He grabbed Kelver. "Can you reactivate this ship's weapons?" Kelver stared at him. "You're insane. The ship's falling apart. That thing gets loose, and it won't stop here." Voss's voice was steel. "We end this. Now." Ralveth hesitated, then nodded. "Do it." Kelver cursed but obeyed. His fingers flew across the interface, rerouting power. The ship groaned, ancient weapons humming to life. The creature realized too late what was happening. Voss turned to the aliens. "Get to your ship," Zyrek growled. "And what about you?" Voss gave a tired grin. "Somebody's gotta make sure it stays dead." The aliens ran. As their vessel pulled away, they watched as the warship, now more monster than machine, burned toward the event horizon of a nearby dead star. Kelver exhaled. "It's over." Ralveth watched in silence as the ship vanished into the abyss. Zyrek crossed his arms. "So." Then softly he muttered, "No, they're the only ones willing to fight nightmares." "The hell it isn't." The weight of the words settled over the room like a storm cloud. Voss lowered his weapon slightly, but his posture remained tense. It was clear that he was still processing everything. 200 years, gone. His people, missing. His war, lost in time. He clenched his jaw. "Where are my people?" Kelver hesitated. There was no easy way to answer that. "That's complicated." The scientist exhaled, his mandibles twitching. Commander, humanity has been missing for nearly 2 centuries. No one knows what happened to them. Voss's hands tightened into fists. He didn't believe it. Something had happened, something big. Fragments of memory stirred in his mind. Fire. Screams. Orders shouted through broken comms. But there was something else, something worse. A shadow at the edge of his thoughts. A nightmare he couldn't quite remember. It wasn't just a war, he murmured, almost to himself. We weren't fighting just another species. Ralvetha's blood ran cold. Then what were you fighting? Before Voss could answer, the ship's long-dormant scanners flickered back to life. The display screen above them blinked and glowed an ominous red. A new alert scrolled across the hollow display. Anomaly detected. A deep silence filled the room, heavier than before. Voss's face hardened. He gripped his weapon and turned toward the bridge. We need to move. Now. Kelver frowned. Wait, what are you saying? Voss turned to the alien crew, his voice grim. I'm saying whatever took humanity out just woke up. The bridge was a graveyard of old technology, dimly lit and covered in dust from centuries of abandonment. But the systems weren't dead. They were rebooting piece by piece. The old warship wasn't just a relic, it was waking up. Kelver's fingers flew across the control panel, his mind torn between fascination and dread. These readings, they don't make sense. Something is out there, but the scanners can't define it. It's like the system can't decide what it's looking at. Zyrek, the massive reptilian enforcer, bared his teeth. That's because it's not supposed to exist. Ralveth shot him a look. You know something? Zyrek's tail flicked nervously. My people have legends. Old ones. Of ships that disappear. Of battles fought in deep space where there was no enemy. Only shadows. Voss stepped forward, gripping the edges of the control panel. Not shadows. His voice was quiet but firm. Predators. The screen glitched. A static-filled image flickered into view, a section of deep space beyond the ship. For a moment, there was nothing, and then the void itself seemed to move. The stars behind it twisted and warped as though something massive was shifting in the darkness. It was shapeless, fluid, absorbing the light around it. Kelver's mandibles twitched. That's impossible. Voss didn't take his eyes off the screen. No, it's worse. The ship trembled. The anomaly was getting closer. Voss turned sharply. How many weapons systems are still operational? Kelver shook his head. A handful. But they're 200 years old. Don't care. Get them online. Ralveth hesitated. You can't seriously be thinking of fighting that thing. Voss turned to face him, his expression grim. You don't understand. It doesn't just kill. It doesn't conquer. He glanced at the screen. It consumes. Zyrek snarled. Then we leave. Now. Voss shook his head. Running won't work. It follows. It learns. If we let it get out of the system, it won't stop. Kelver exhaled. You've fought this before. Voss nodded. Not just me. All of us. He took a breath, his voice quieter now. That's why humanity disappeared. Ralveth felt his stomach twist. You're telling me humanity fought this alone? Voss gave a bitter smile. We didn't have a choice. The ship lurched violently. The lights flickered. Kelver's screen flashed another alert. Hull breach in progress. Zyrek readied his weapon. It's here. A deep, resonating sound echoed through the ship, like metal groaning, but distorted, wrong. The air itself felt heavier. The walls rippled. Ralveth took a step back. That's not possible. Voss exhaled. You keep saying that. The corridor ahead of them darkened unnaturally, as though something was sucking the light out of the space. Then movement, a shifting, twisting mass of black sinew, both solid and fluid at the same time. Pulsed and shifted, adapting with every second. Kelver's voice was barely above a whisper. What is that? Voss raised his rifle, his hands steady. The reason we built ships like this. The anomaly lunged. Voss fired. The corridor exploded into chaos. The creature was fast, too fast. It moved like liquid shadow, reforming instantly when hit. Zyrek roared and unleashed a blast of plasma, but the energy was absorbed. The next moment, the thing reshaped, mimicking the attack, and fired the plasma back, twice as strong. Ralveth barely ducked in time as the walls behind him melted. "We can't fight this thing." Voss didn't even look at him. "We're not fighting. We're finishing it." Kelver turned to him in disbelief. "How?" Voss gestured toward the controls. "We turn the ship into a bomb." Kelver hesitated. "That would destroy us too." Voss smiled grimly. "That's the idea." For a moment no one spoke. Then slowly Ralveth understood. Humans hadn't vanished. They had been fighting a war no one else knew about. And now it was their turn to finish it. The ship groaned as its ancient systems flickered back to life. Metal grinding against metal as if awakening from a long and painful slumber. The once dormant AI stuttered, its corrupted voice echoing through the halls. Words slurred by centuries of degradation. "Warning. Containment failure." Ralveth felt his secondary stomach twist in unease. The words repeated over and over, but they held no meaning to him. What exactly was being contained? And why did this failing system seem so desperate to warn them? Kelver glanced at Voss, and what he saw made his mandibles twitch with unease. The human's expression had gone from grim determination to something worse, recognition. He knew. Without hesitation, Voss moved, his body snapping into action before the aliens even understood what was happening. He slammed his hand against a nearby console, bringing up a security feed from deep within the ship's cargo hold. The screen flickered to life, revealing a massive, reinforced chamber. The heavy-duty containment locks, glowing red, were failing one by one. Kelver's breath hitched. "That's not possible. This ship is 2 centuries old. How is anything still alive in there?" Voss didn't answer immediately, his jaw clenched, his posture rigid. "Because we never killed it," he finally muttered. "We only locked it away." A heavy metallic clunk echoed through the corridor. The final containment seal had broken. At the far end of the hall, the thick doors hissed open, revealing only darkness beyond. Silence stretched for an unbearable moment. Then something moved. It was subtle at first, a glisten of unnatural motion, a ripple in the air itself. Then the shadows shifted, and the thing inside the containment chamber began to take form. It pulsed and stretched, its surface writhing between solid and liquid. One moment, it was an unrecognizable mass of twisting sinew. The next, it began to approximate something humanoid. But it was wrong. The proportions were too fluid, its shape too unstable. And its eyes, if they could be called that, were nothing more than black voids, consuming light rather than reflecting it. Kelver stumbled back. What is that thing?" Voss cocked his rifle. His face was like stone. "Something humanity fought long before the rest of you even knew it existed." The creature lunged. The corridor erupted into chaos. The bioweapon moved too fast, adapting as it attacked. It extended jagged limbs, shifting them into razor-sharp blades that sliced through metal as if it were nothing. Zyrek roared, his reptilian strength on full display as he fired his plasma weapon. The shot hit its mark, only for the energy to sink into the creature's body and disappear. A second later, the thing reshaped its arm into a cannon-like appendage and spat the plasma back, only stronger. Ralveth barely dodged as a section of the floor melted under the counterattack. "We can't fight this thing," he shouted. Voss didn't even flinch. His voice was pure command. "We're not fighting. We're finishing it." While the aliens panicked, the human was already thinking ahead. He grabbed Kelver by the arm and pointed to the nearest terminal. "Can you reactivate the warship's weapons?" Kelver's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "The ship is falling apart. Those weapons are 2 centuries old. That doesn't answer my question." Kelver hesitated, then started working. The alien crew saw the madness in Voss's plan. He wasn't just trying to escape. He was turning the ship itself into a weapon. "This is insane," Zyrek muttered. "Why didn't your people tell the rest of us about this thing?" Voss let out a sharp breath, eyes still locked on the twisting mass. Because we didn't have time to talk. We were too busy trying to stop them. Kelver's mind reeled. The implications were staggering. If this thing, this living nightmare, had been fought by humans alone, then that meant, you've been fighting these creatures for centuries, he realized aloud. Alone. Voss's expression remained unreadable, but his silence spoke volumes. Captain, Kelver called out urgently. Primary cannons are coming online, but the ship's structure can't handle it for long. If we fire those weapons, we'll lose all integrity. That's the idea, Voss replied grimly. Ralveth stiffened. You're not suggesting. Voss turned to face them all. We don't leave this ship intact. If this thing gets loose, it won't stop at us. It will consume everything. The bioweapon wasn't waiting for them to finish their discussion. It had already begun assimilating the ship itself. The walls rippled as it spread like a virus, integrating into the vessel's systems, overriding controls, absorbing technology. The warship, once a proud human battlecruiser, was being twisted into something unrecognizable. Ralvetha's mind raced. He had spent his career underestimating humans, thinking of them as reckless, primitive, a species that burned too bright and vanished too soon. But now, watching Voss stand alone against a horror no one else had ever faced, he understood. Humans weren't conquerors. They were the only ones willing to fight nightmares. We need to go, Kelver urged. Now. Voss's face was unreadable. Get to your ship, he ordered. Zyrek bared his teeth. And what about you? Voss just smiled. A tired, knowing grin of a soldier who had already accepted his fate. Someone's gotta make sure it stays dead. The aliens didn't argue. They sprinted for the docking bay, their minds unable to fully process the sheer scale of what they had just witnessed. As their salvage vessel broke free from the dying warship, they watched in silence as the massive battlecruiser, now more monster than machine, burned toward a nearby dead star. The bioweapon realized too late what was happening. It writhed, twisting, trying to escape, but Voss had already sealed its fate. The warship vanished into the star's gravity well. A brilliant explosion erupted in the void, and then nothing. Silence. Kelver exhaled. It's gone. Zyrek looked away. So is he. Ralveth didn't speak for a long time. Then, quietly, he muttered, We spent centuries wondering where the humans went. His eyes stayed locked on the empty space where the warship had been. Now I think I understand. They didn't just disappear. He turned to face his crew. They stayed behind to make sure the rest of us survived. The ship shook violently as power surged through circuits that had been dead for 200 years. Ancient weapon systems hummed to life, flickering back online. The aliens watched in a mixture of awe and horror as Voss single-handedly turned a floating tomb into a war machine. Primary cannons coming online, Kelver reported, though his voice wavered. But the ship's structure can't handle it for long. If you fire these weapons, we'll lose all integrity. That's the idea, Voss replied grimly. Ralveth stiffened. You're not suggesting. Voss turned to face them all. We don't leave this ship intact. If this thing gets loose, it won't stop at us. It will consume everything. The bioweapon wasn't waiting for them to finish their discussion. It had already begun assimilating the ship itself. The walls rippled as it spread like a virus, integrating into the vessel's systems, overriding controls, absorbing technology. The warship, once a proud human battlecruiser, was being twisted into something unrecognizable. It's learning, Kelver whispered, horror creeping into his voice. It's not just taking over the ship, it's adapting to it. Then we need to move faster, Voss said, pushing past them toward the main console. Kelver, can you override the reactor's failsafe? Kelver hesitated. That would cause a critical meltdown. The explosion. We'll make sure nothing walks away from this. Voss finished. Ralveth felt his mind race. The humans were always seen as unpredictable, dangerous even. But this was something else. They weren't reckless. They were resolute, determined, willing to make sacrifices that no other species would dare to consider. Zyrek snarled. I don't like leaving people behind. If we work together, maybe Voss cut him off with a sharp look. No time. This thing won't give us another chance. You have to go. Kelver's mandibles clicked uncertainly. You don't have to do this alone. Voss smiled, but there was no joy in it, just exhaustion. I already did. 200 years ago. You're just late to the party. The alien crew had no more time to argue. Alarms screamed through the corridors. The bioweapon had reached the reactor room. The ship shuddered as the entity tore into its systems, trying to stop what Voss had set in motion. Go! Voss barked. The aliens ran. Through the viewport of their departing salvage vessel, Ralveth watched as the warship, now more monster than machine, burned toward the dead star. The bioweapon writhed, twisting, trying to escape, but Voss had already sealed its fate. The battlecruiser's engines roared, pushing it faster and faster into oblivion. Kelver's fingers trembled over his console. We should have done more. Zyrek's tail lashed. He didn't give us the chance. Ralveth exhaled slowly. No, he gave us a lesson. A brilliant explosion erupted in the void. The dying star consumed the warship in a final, blinding inferno. Then, nothing. Silence. Kelver exhaled. It's gone. Zyrek looked away. So is he. Ralveth didn't speak for a long time. Then, quietly, he muttered. We spent centuries wondering where the humans went. His eyes stayed locked on the empty space where the warship had been. Now I think I understand. They didn't just disappear. He turned to face his crew. They stayed behind to make sure the rest of us survived. The weight of that truth settled over them. Humanity had never vanished. They had been fighting a war no one else knew about, sacrificing everything to keep the galaxy safe. And now, that burden had passed to the rest of them. Disclaimer. The story you just experienced is fictional, exploring themes of survival, fear of the unknown, and the consequences of forgotten wars. It serves as a reflection on humanity's enduring impact, even in the void of space, and the mysteries that may lie beyond. Let it spark your imagination and curiosity about what lurks in the darkness.